It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander Break for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I take my first shot at the commander in front of us on a budget on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing it, as we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, so I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're going to keep going through Final Fantasy content. We're going to finally start getting into some of these through the ages, bonus sheet cards. And a commander that I pretty much wanted to cover due to how many wizards were in the set got a reprint, which I think is good, although there's definitely been a discourse online about some of the people not liking some of the screen grabs as arts on the cards. But today, we're going to talk about Kuja, Mage Manufacturer, aka Inalla, Archmage, Ritualist, a 5-mana 4/5 Grixis human wizard. With Eminence, one of the few commanders that has an Eminence ability. It says whenever another non-token wizard we control enters, if Kuja is in the command zone or on the battlefield, we can pay 1. If we do, we make a token that's copy that wizard. That token gets haste, and we exile at the beginning of the next end step. It's a very interesting ability, and definitely could be used to double up a bunch of our wizards that have some key abilities, either on enter or when other wizards come in, or when we cast spells and things like that. And then Kuja's bottom ability just says we could tap 5 untapped wizards we control to have somebody of our choice lose 7 life. So Kuja's a very interesting, or Inalla's a very interesting commander. I covered Inalla back in Foundations because we got a bunch of great reprints of different wizards and things like that. And the audio wasn't very good on that one, so I kind of wanted to redo this, not only because there was a bunch of this new wizards for it, but also because I really wanted to give it another shot since the last one was so bad, and make sure this one looks good. So what are we going to do? Well, obviously play wizards, right? I think that's what Inalla cares about. And then we're going to try to either copy, blink, do things to get our wizards back in, to get more copies of them. There's a lot of ways we can take Inalla, and I think this is just the shot I'm going to take, ETB, copy, blink, that kind of thing, to make our wizards come in again and again. I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you should check out all of our videos just a teeny bit early, check that out down below. But there's so many interesting wizards. I think you're going to see that the new wizards in Final Fantasy do definitely see their place here, but we have some old ones as well. Things like a zombie can just tap a wizard to draw a card. This is a really key wizard when we start making these copies. Let's say we make a copy of a wizard like Bloodline Necromancer. It comes in and we can return a wizard creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield, but maybe we don't want to attack with it, or for some reason we can't. Well, we can still tap it to something like a zombie and still get value right before the token goes away. Apprentice Necromancer says you can pay a black, tap it, and sack it to bring a creature from our graveyard back to the battlefield. And then, at the end step, sacrifice it, which is a very interesting ability. But remember that, right, with the right amount of mana, you can bring it back in, get a copy, and get so much more value right out of that wizard coming back. Speaking of wizards that drain a lot of value, we have something like Cyclone Summoner, which returns all permanents in those hands except for giants, wizards, and lands. This is really huge because it should be a nice one-sided board wipe for us. Just bouncing all our opponents' things back and keeping our wizards safe. Galecaster Colossus could tap a wizard to just return a non-land permanent we don't control to its owner's hand. So here we could take advantage of those copies or other wizards by just tapping them to bounce things back. Harmonic Prodigy doubles all triggered abilities of wizards we control, which is really cool because not only would this double Kuja's ability or Inalla's ability if it's on the battlefield, but it's also going to double all the other wizards and shamans we have on the battlefield, which is every one of our creatures, right? Playing a couple of the new Final Fantasy wizards. We're playing Kefka. I didn't show the backside of Kefka because it's not as important. I think the front side's what we care the most about Kefka. I think everybody pitch a card and we draw a card equal to the number of types among cards that were discarded this way. I think this is a key ability because you can copy it with Inalla's ability, and then Kefka, the copy, can wreak havoc, getting this happen multiple times, having us refill our hand, hurt our opponents a little bit. Same thing with the other Kuja, the Kuja from the main set. Beginning our end step, you make a wizard token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then if you have 4 more wizards, you get to flip Kuja over to the backside into Trance Kuja, this big 4/6 that says if a wizard we control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. So a very interesting creature. If you're interested in seeing my brew for Kuja, that's actually going to be on the channel tomorrow, so you'll be able to see it there. Obsidian Elder, when it comes in, makes a wizard token with that deal 1 damage to each opponent ability. This, I think, is a really fun idea for a blink target, or a good copy with Inalla, because then you can hold those tokens around and start dealing out damage when we cast our spells. Naban, same thing. If a wizard we control entering would cause a triggered ability of a permanent we control to go off, it goes off an additional time. So, again, won't affect Inalla in the command zone, but would affect any other wizard on the battlefield, which is still important. Narumaha can flash in to copy a spell, which is pretty fun. And if we wanted to pay the one more mana, we could make a copy of Narumaha, copying the spell a second time, right? So we can potentially get a lot of copy out of a particular spell if we needed to for 4 and or 5 mana. Patron Wizard can tap an untapped wizard to counter a spell unless its controller pays 1. I think this is a really interesting ability. Like a lot of times in our format, people play spells and leave almost no mana up. Or, this may be a scenario where just taxing them to pay 1 or 2 mana might just stop them from playing the spell they were going to play after the spell they're playing. A lot of times we take these turns where maybe we have 6 mana and we're playing, 2-3 mana spells. You'd be very surprised how often just attacks of 1 or 2 mana can really stop an opponent in their tracks in making their turn the way they want it. The Emperor Palamecia can tap for a mana, and it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana is spent to cast it, you put a counter on it, and then if it has 3 or more counters on it, you flip it over into the Lord Master of Hell, a 3/3 Demon Noble Wizard that says whenever it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, works as the number of non-creature, non-land cards in our graveyard. So, right, each of those spells, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, battles, each of those in our graveyard are going to deal the damage to each opponent. And I think it's just interesting to see these examples of creatures that can become really good in the mid to late game if we could put some value in around them. Vidalcan Aethermage is a really interesting creature because its ability is not super great, but we play it for its bottom ability to pay 3 to just go get any wizard we want, which is a huge deal, especially when you have wizards that can warp the game around themselves, like Vivi next to it, right? This is one of the most popular and talked about cards from Final Fantasy. Whenever you cast a spell, you're putting counters on it and dealing damage to each opponent. It can add mana. I mean, Vivi's a great wizard, and I feel like fits really well in the deck alongside things like Kefka and Kuja and even like Kess, to play things out of your graveyard. You just see some of these wizards that are so good depending on the setup we have. I think things like this wizard cycling can be really useful to go get the right wizard at the right time. Kidra Dominance, just pick a creature type, destroy all creatures that aren't the type. Obviously, we're going to pick wizards for a nice one-sided board wipe. Step Through is our other wizard cycling target. We can pay 2 to pitch to go get a wizard, but Step Through is always also interesting because we can return 2 creatures to their owner's hands. We could return our own things if we wanted to. Very rarely are we going to do that. I think more than often we're going to use this for the wizard cycling, but it's important to have that there. Same thing with something like Mirror Box beside it. Stopping the legendary rule from affecting our permanents means that all of our legendary wizards could still get copies of them, and that I think could be really important, especially for things like Kuya or Kefka or Vivi, to take big turns when they come in and get more value from having both of them, because the copy that Kuya/Inalla makes is not going to be non-legendary. So the legendary rule is still going to apply, and that's where I think we want to value things like Mirror Box and some of the copy stuff we'll talk about later. Molten Echo says whenever it comes in, we choose a type. Obviously, we're going to choose wizards. Whenever a non-token wizard comes in, we just get a copy of it and it gets hastened until end of turn. So again, another way to pair up on these abilities that are going to be coming in. Well, a lot of our wizards, like we talked about, do have ETB abilities, so we do want to take advantage of that. Things like Panharmonicon and Virtual Knowledge are just going to straight double, right, those abilities going off as long as it's the permanent, right, coming in. Roaming Throne's kind of different because it's going to double up all of our wizards' triggered abilities no matter what. Unfortunately, Roaming Throne won't affect Inalla unless Inalla's on the battlefield, but if Inalla's on the battlefield, then Roaming Throne will cause Inalla to go off twice, which is pretty fun. And Roaming Throne just ends up doubling a lot of really great abilities. We have so many wizards with triggered abilities, and so Roaming Throne's just going to help us a ton to double those abilities and give us more value as we go. But where I think the deck, again, is going to really shine is this copy and blink idea. As far as copy, what I mean is things like Sakashima, which can come in as a copy of anything and shuts off the legendary rule. So you could copy Inalla, you could copy one of our other legendary wizards we talked about. Same thing with Spark Double. Spark Double comes in as a copy of anything, but if it's legendary, it just isn't legendary. So that's pretty fun too, because then Spark Double's coming in as a wizard, right? That's a copy of something that isn't legendary, meaning Kuya can copy it with its ability, right? And now you have 2 of those and you're getting more value that turn. Go-Go, I think, just looks like a ton of fun, copying a triggered ability at the right time. You'd be very surprised how often I think Go-Go for 2 mana for, or 4 mana for 2 copies or 6 mana for 3 copies could be really important on a turn, just depending on what you have triggering that's going off. I think Goya is just a nice copy utility piece alongside some of our other things. But we do have spells like Irenicus's Vile Duplication that just makes a copy of something, except it isn't legendary. Displace and Essence Flux are example of spells that are just going to blink a creature, so exile it and bring it back in. And those, of course, can be used offensively and defensively. Offensively to get an ETB trigger at the right time, but defensively because if somebody's trying to single target remove something on our board, as long as it's not a token, right, we can just blink it and have it come back in, right, to keep it safe, and then, use it again on a future turn. Same thing with something like Ghostly Flicker again. Conjurer's Closet, right at the beginning of our end step, we get to blink a creature and have it come back in. This is a really fun ability because, again, if we pick the right creature, we can just guarantee that value every time. It opens up another window for Inella's ability to go out for us to pay 1 to get another copy of it. So, this could just be really fun. I think it'd be really fun with something like Kefka, to force that discard, or, again, some of our other wizards that have key ETB abilities. And then Reflections of Litjara. Come in, pick wizards. Anytime you cast a wizard, you get to copy it. Again, just another fun way to copy these things and get more value from them. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my first pass at Inalla this time, especially with the new support. And going into testing, I'd want to make sure that we have enough. We have enough ETB abilities. The one wizard I had a really tough time cutting was Ruthless Technomancer. It says when it comes in, you can sack another creature you control, and if you do, you make a number of treasures equal to its power. The reason I like the Technomancer is because it can come in and sack those wizard tokens that are going to go away anyway and just net you treasures for it. And then you can pay, you can sack the treasures to bring creatures back from your graveyard. Technomancer is probably a wizard that should have been in the deck, but I just went back and forth on what to cut and ended up cutting it to prioritize some of the new wizards and some of the other things. But I think I could see it pretty readily coming back in. Circle of Power seems kind of interesting. You draw 2 cards, you lose 2, you make that new wizard token that deals damage, and then all your wizards get +1/+1 lifelink. I just think that's a really interesting spell. I guess the question is going to come down to how often is that +1/+1 lifelink really going to affect our board? Is it going to lead to a good life swing? Is it going to lead to a good attack? And if the answer is yes most of the time, then maybe Circle of Power is worth coming in. I also thought about something like Kitsa, allowing you to draw and then discard. I feel like is a huge ability, especially since we have multiple wizards that can reanimate things back out of the graveyard. Figured that makes sense, and then you can pay to copy things as long as your prowess is brought Kitsa's ability or power up high enough. Just another value wizard that I think just comes down to how you want to build Inalla, what route you want to go, and where you're going to find your value. But let's do what we love to do on the show on the most and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on our channel is not to find Magical Christmas Land. It's not to show off our best plays, but it's to get in some gameplay under stereos, talk about why we're going to keep certain hands, and kind of see how we can build up our board. Here we got a 2-laner with Arcane Signet, which may not seem like a lot because Inalla's, would be 5 mana. We have a couple 4 big mana plays, but we do have something like Vidalcan Aether Mage, which remember can go get a wizard of our choice. So if it's something like Vivi that we want, we have perfect things to go get Vivi. Aether Channeler, when it comes in, we choose one, make a bird, return something back out to its hand, or draw a card. Channeler is kind of a fun wizard with Inalla because if we paid the 4th mana, Channeler can come in. The real one could draw us a card or make us a bird, and then the copy could come in and bounce the original back to our hand, making sure that we can do this recurribly over and over again, right? And then if you had something like, Molten Echoes or Litjara, you can get even more value off of it. So I don't mind this one. Again, the 3 mana gets us to Vivi if that's what we want. It gets us to, some other options in the deck. So I think we're doing okay. Of course, 1 or 2 lands would be ideal, but I don't think we're dead in the water, even if we don't, because we do have wizards that can help us with it. But turn 1, we see a Cascade Bluffs, which is helpful. That's a 4th mana now. Now we have at least Molten Echoes. That makes me more willing to play Channeler just by itself if something like Echoes or Litjara down and not pay for Inalla if I can't. Turn 2 here, I think I'm just willing to get Arcane Signet. I can pop this Preordain if I want to, but I think the question becomes, if I'm going to put this for Vivi, there's no reason to play this Preordain until Vivi comes down, right? If I'm going to play this Archmage Aether Mage for something like Kefka, then maybe it makes more sense to dig for that 5th mana, right? Or the 6th mana, right? Or you know what I'm saying? Like, I think there's probably arguments of do I use this blue mana while I have it, or do I hold it up and make somebody think I have, right, a something to use it for. So again, if we're gonna go for Vivi, I want to save the preordained to trigger Vivi. If we're gonna go for something like Kuya or or Kefka or some of our other wizards, I think it's worth just dumping preordained now just to get an extra mana piece. So it kind of depends. At this point, I'd be looking to like Gloomlake Verge into Molten Echoes next turn. So I guess it comes down to when we would do this. But my thought there is then something like Channeler becomes even better once this Molten Echoes down. Getting me basically 2 copies of it, right? Getting more card draw, more value that way. So I think I'm willing to try the Preordained just to see what we get. So we scry 2 and then draw cards. We've got Shivan Reef and then Naban. Naban's great because that's going to actually make Aether Channeler even better. So I think this is a pretty great one just to do that. Now on turn 3, I think I'm still convincing myself towards Molten Echoes. Because now at next turn I can go Naban plus the Aether Channeler and still get the loop going and, it's still getting good value. So now as we come to turn 5, we can Naban, it will trigger Kuya, we don't want to pay. Right. We will get a copy of Naban because of Molten Echoes, but it's just unfortunately going to, it would go off twice, but again, they're legendary, they're just going to die. But now with the Channeler, right, we get the first copy because of Molten Echoes. Naban gets us the second copy with Molten Echoes, right? I think probably what I would do is just have at least one of them draw me a card. One of them is going to put the original Channeler back in my hand, and I think the other one probably just makes sense to draw me a card, right? We have these with haste, might as well attack with them, use what we can. But the point is now we're getting cards into our hand. So now here on turn 5, I've got 6 mana. Felwar would put me down to 5, but would give me more mana next turn. And then I could dump the Channeler and pay Kuya's ability, so that would actually give me... I'm actually just realizing that, each of those Aether Channelers would have gone off twice as well. So let's just say that for the purpose of this, I took the bird tokens, which I think makes the most sense, right? Just to have some creatures around. I said I had 5 mana. I could go, the Channeler route and pay the 1 to get that. Or instead of playing the Felwar Stone, I could just Wizard Cycle this Aether Mage away. The problem right now is I'm not having a ton of non-legendary creatures in hand, so I don't know if going something like for Vivi makes the most sense. But I think Vivi is one of those cards that, of course, everybody's going to value. I kind of like the idea of trying the Felwar Stone plus the Aether Channeler here. So again, I can pay the 1 from Kuya. So this is going to come in, trigger the Molten Echoes twice, and then I will pay 1 for the Kuya to trigger it a 3rd time. So now each of these are going to go off twice. I think I might as well just draw for at least a couple of them. One of them will put Channeler back in my hand. So I'm thinking, what? Draw 3, make... Thinking just like, what? Draw 3, make 4 birds. Just to get more value on the board. These can attack or do whatever. They're just going to die no matter what. We say another land. Trying to think, what do I pitch, right? Because I love the idea of getting the mana down. But what else do you get? I love the Gale Colossus start bouncing things, especially if we're going to keep this Channeler combo going. I mean, maybe it's Lit Jara. We're kind of past the point of Lit Jara now that we have the Molten Echoes down. I mean, I guess there's a lot of arguments there. But I think you start to see the idea of this forming. Now we're at 8 mana. Vivi could be fun to put in. I just don't see us playing a non-creature spell this turn. The nice part is we can still... It's a value. We got all these birds in the air, right? So now the birds become an issue in the air, right? Is they're just going to keep getting more each turn. By Vivi, I've got 5 mana left. Vivi would actually get copies of itself, but the copies are just going to die, right? Because of the legendary rule. I I could still chant. I could still do this wizard cycle. I'm just trying to think of what wizard do I get here. I love the idea of just something like Kefka. Just start targeting people's hands, really start raking them down. At the moment, I'd get 2 copies of the Kefka on Molten Echoes. And so basically, I'd have 3 Kefka triggers. Everybody's going to have to discard. We're going to net a bunch of cards on our hand. We may eventually. Unfortunately, we probably might have to discard probably too many cards. My other thought this turn is we could go something like Vivi plus Sakashima, copying Vivi. And then now we get to keep both of these around. And then next turn, right, we could Wizard Cycle plus Kefka, and we get to keep all the Kefkas because the Legendary rule wouldn't apply. That's always an option. Same thing with this Sakashima. Because it becomes a copy of Vivi, we would actually get the Molten Echoes to go off. We would have 2 Vivis this turn with the haste if we needed to use them, right, for something that way. It's a very interesting board state we'd have here, depending on what we want to do. But again, I don't even mind the VV plus channel, or if we wanted to meme the birds again, draw more cards. There's so many ways you can approach the game plan. I think this one that kind of show you what the value of Inalla, right, really can be. Let's get to playtest number 2 here. Keeping a 3-lander with talismans. There's 4 mana. We get Spark Double Arenikis, which can copy a creature and make it non-legendary, and then Virtue and Knowledge, which on its adventure sign can just copy an activated trigger ability, and then on its main side is one of those Panharmonicon style effects. So nothing too killer, but I think we have good mana, and we have some things once we get there. I think we can allow ourselves a couple turns to draw into some good effects. So there's the Xander's Lounge, turn 1. I'm willing just to put the Talisman out. I don't need to go too deep on the Dark Ritual to get something out, because truthfully, I don't really see anything I'd want to do right now. Now, here, it could be worth, Dark Ritualing to get Inalla out if we want to, because now Sakashima and Spark Double can copy Inalla, right? Which could be fun. That's a turn 3 Inalla. Now Inalla can start making copies. But the interesting here to me now is I can Sakashima on Inalla, and because this is a now a non-token creature, I could basically make a copy of Inalla for the turn, right? This would have haste, but I'd have 2 Inallas that could attack this turn. You could go the same route with Spark Double, but again, now, right, you'd have the copy of the Inalla for a turn. It can attack. We're just, again, working our way up to those wizards to start people, having people lose life. Here, I guess there is the idea where we could instead last turn just play the Virtue, right? And double up for future turns and do the Sakashima this turn where you would get 2 copies, got to pay 4 for Sakashima, and then, right, 2 for each copy of the Kuja. So that line probably makes more sense, right? Play the Sakashima this turn, get 2 copies of Kuja and this one, right? Because of the doubling up on the triggered ability. These guys then get to attack. Sorry, both of them, yeah, and then Sakashima wouldn't see itself entering. But now this turn, when I play Spark Double, copying Inalla, I've got 3 mana up. Both of these are going to trigger twice, basically letting me have, right, 3 copies of Inalla to, again, attack, create some, right, some havoc with. And then, we could Arenikis if we want to, but now we got into the awkward scenario of just not hitting any card draw, and it's kind of gonna mess us up a little bit, right? Because we need those wizards, right, to come in and do something, right, to give us the card draw. We have some wizards, right, that do that. So this is a little awkward in hand in that we saw all of our copy, but we just couldn't get there. But I think those turns where we got multiple Inallas, hopefully they could have been attacking, softening up our opponents. And then now we could get a 4th Inalla with the Arenikis' Val duplication to again have more of a threat. Kind of an odd one there. I think I would have liked to have seen a few more wizards, but I mean, I feel like that's going to happen some games, and it's still good to see those playtests where you don't see all the ideal things so that you can understand where the pitfalls of your deck are. So this is a borderline hand here, but I think it's worth trying to try out. So we got a 2-lander with Preordain and Naban. So we have early plays, especially if this can get us another land. Prismark Command can dig and make us a treasure, so it'll help there. Go can, copy triggered abilities. We have the 3-mana rock. So if we can hit another land, I think we're off to a good start. It's just going to be getting it. So if we don't get it turn 1, we probably want to dump this Preordain to try to find it. So turn 1, we see Kefka, which isn't ideal. I think I want to dig with Preordain just to see what we have. We see Maestro's Theater, and we see Narmaha. So, Narmeha. I think Narmeha's probably not going to be useful to us right away. Maestro's Theater is great. It's going to go get us another land. I think I'm willing to bottom the Narmeha for now. So there's our 3rd mana for the Decanter. We're working our way up, and Decanter is really nice with Kefka because it's going to give us no maximum hand size, so Kefka can really just start to wreak havoc. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and Maestro's Theater. I think I've got to get the mountain here just to set up all my colors, right? Because Shipwreck Marsh is going to come in next turn as a blue-black land, so I think we want to make sure we're covering our spread. There is Dualcaster Mage. So we do have the classic Dualcaster Mage Twin Flame combo in the deck to make a bunch of Dualcaster Mages. So that is there if we can find it. But turn 3, we're up to 4 mana, and we have no maximum hand size now, which is pretty great. There's the Emperor. Remember, the Emperor's mana can only be used to cast a non-creature spell, though. But I almost think maybe like Nablan plus the Emperor. Again, we don't need to trigger any of them, but we do just give ourselves access to more for next turn. Okay, well, there's the Wizard Cycler. So that could go get something if we need it to. I've got 4 mana. 1 of it can only be used to cast a spell, though, right? So basically 4 mana, but it could be 5 if I need it to be to cast a spell. If I Prismari Command, I can draw 2, pitch 2, and make a treasure, which would give me enough mana to go for something more next turn. I could step through and just go get a wizard. I'm trying to think, what wizard would I go get at this point? We could go get the Aether Channeler just to start digging through our deck. I mean, at this point, it's either find some ways to generate mana or find the Twin Flame, right, for Dualcaster Mage, right? I think both are legal options here. I think the Prismarity command, right, does help us dig as well. Or eventually the Emperor could flip over. The only thing I like about Aether Channeler at this point is we have Naban out, right? So we're going to be doubling up. We're going to be getting good draws and that kind of thing, which makes me kind of want to go for that. I can Prismari Command plus Wizard Cycle this turn. So that could be interesting as well, right? Because I can make the treasure and effectively go up to 6 mana, right? Because the Emperor gets to tap for 1 of it. So I think I'll do that. I'm thinking make the treasure with Prismari Command. Really thinking draw 2, pitch 2. But I guess the question is, what am I pitching? I don't want to have to pitch, I guess Go-Go is one of the cards I'm willing to pitch, but I really like the other one. So I don't know that I want to do that. I guess I could dole out 2 damage to something if I want to. But I think I'll just go ahead and step through. And I'm thinking, again, of going to get the our Aether Channeler. Just to, again, start that process. Really make sure that we're getting value from that. Emperor's not going to go off because 4 more mana wasn't spent to cast it. But we did use that treasure. And then now as we come to our turn 4 mana, we have 5. Again, if it's used to cast on creature spell, I don't mind putting the Reflections to let Jara down, especially if the Channeler is the plan, right? That puts counter on the Emperor. I actually realized, because Naben's only going to double ETBs, right? It's not going to double, just triggered. So I don't mind that. And now I think we're just setting ourselves up, even though it's a little bit late, we're setting ourselves up for the Channeler Prey. We're also have a nice Roaming Throne play here as well. But we could also just be too late. Maybe we're too late in the game. We just waffled for too long with mana. That's a possibility. The only really downside is we just don't have the mana to cast something like Kefka, which I feel like could have been a good way to kind of blow the game back in our favor. But let's say we do the channeler, we copy it, the copy comes in, and unfortunately that kind of stinks for us, right? Because the copy's what we needed, well, in some sense, to bounce the original Aether Channeler back to our hand. So let's just say the Channeler, draws us 2. The copy draws us 2. The real one comes in. We pay the mana from Kuja to make a copy of it, right? The copy bounces the original back. And I guess it could, make a bird. And let's say the original channeler makes, a couple birds. There's a land for turn we could play to not completely drop our land size out. And now we're in Kefka range on the next turn, right? So now on this turn, we could go for the Kefka. We've got the maximum hand size. And I think we're still probably a turn or 2 late here, but I think we still got there eventually. Or we are in bracket 3, so this isn't a bracket 4 deck. This isn't going to have all the mana acceleration and things like that. But I'd love to know, what do you think of Inalla down in the comment section below? I think it's a really interesting deck. I don't mind the screen grab for Kuja, but I know there's some people who don't like the look of it. I also don't think the deck's perfect by any means. I think there's a lot we can learn in testing, but I'd love to know what you think, and I will catch you on the next one.